Paris. In Paris it was, in the summer of 1840. There I first met that strange and interesting young fellow, Auguste Dupin. Dupin was the last member of a well-known family, a family which had once been rich and famous. He himself, however, was far from rich. He cared a little about money. He had enough to buy the most necessary things in life, and a few books. He did not trouble himself about the rest, just books. With books, he was happy. We first met when we were both trying to find the same book, as it was a book which few had ever heard of. This chance brought us together in an old bookstore. Later, we met again in the same store, then again in another store. Soon, we began to talk. I was deeply interested in the family history he told me. I was surprised, too, at how much and how widely he had read. More important, the force of his busy mind was like a bright light in my soul. I felt that the friendship of such a man would be for more riches without prize. I therefore told him of my feelings towards him, and he agreed to come and live with me. He would have, I thought, the joy of using my many fine books, and I would have the pleasure of having someone with me, for I was not happy alone. We passed the days reading, writing, and talking, but Dupin was a lover of the night, and at night, often with only the light of the stars to show us the way, we walked the streets of Paris, sometimes talking, sometimes quiet, always thinking. I soon noticed a special reasoning power he had, an unusual reasoning power. Using it gave him great pleasure. He told me once with a soft and quiet laugh that most men have windows over their hearts. Through these, he could see into their souls. Then he surprised me by telling what he knew about my own soul, and I found that he knew things about me that I had thought only I could possibly know. His manners at these moments were cold and distant. His eyes looked empty and far away, and his voice became high and nervous. At such times, it seemed to me that I saw not just Dupin, but two Dupins. One who coldly put things together, and another who just as coldly took them apart. One night we were walking down one of Paris's long and dirty streets. Both of us were busy with our thoughts. Neither had spoken for perhaps 15 minutes. It seemed as if we had each forgotten that the other was there at his side. I soon learned that Dupin had not forgotten me. However, suddenly he said, "You're right. He is a very little fellow, that's true. And he would be more successful if he had acted in lighter, less serious plays." "Yes, there could be no doubt of that," I said. At first I saw nothing strange in this. Dupin had agreed with me with my own thoughts. This, of course, seemed to be quite natural. For a few seconds I continued walking and thinking, but suddenly I realized that Dupin had agreed with something which was only a thought. I had not spoken a single word. I stopped walking and turned to my friend. "Dupin," I said, "this is beyond my understanding. How could you know what I was thinking of?" Here I stopped in order to test him, to learn if he really did know my unspoken thoughts. "How did I know you were thinking of Chantilly?" "Why do you stop? You were thinking that Chantilly is too small for the place in which he acts." "This is indeed what I was thinking. But tell me, in heaven's name, the method, if method there is, by which you have been able to see into my soul in this matter." "It was the fruit cellar." "Fruit cellar? I know no fruit cellar." I mean the man who ran into you as we entered the street. It may have been 10 or 15 minutes ago, perhaps less. Yes, that's true. I remember now. A fruit seller carrying a large basket of apples on his head almost threw me down. But I don't understand why the fruit seller should make me think of Chantilly. Or if he did, how can you know that? I will explain. Listen closely now. Let us follow your thoughts from the fruit seller to the play actor Chantilly. Those thoughts must have gone like this. From the fruit seller to the cobblestones. From the cobblestones to Stereotomy. And from Stereotomy to Epicurus. To Orion and then to Chantilly. As we turned into the street, the fruit seller, walking very quickly past us, ran against you and made you step on some cobblestones, which had not been put down evenly, and I could see that the stones had hurt your foot. You spoke a few angry words to yourself and continued walking, but you kept looking down at the cobblestones in the street, so I knew you were thinking of stones. Then we came to a small street. There they are putting down street stones, which they have cut in a new and very special way. Here, your face became brighter and I saw your lips move. I could not doubt that you were saying the word stereotomy, the name for this new way of cutting stones. It's a strange word, isn't it? But you will remember that we read about it in the newspaper only yesterday. I thought that the word stereotomy must make you think of that old Greek writer named Epicurus, who wrote of something he called atoms. He believed that the world and everything in the heavens above are made of these atoms. Not long ago, you and I were talking about Epicurus and his ideas, his atoms, ideas which Epicurus wrote more than 2,000 years ago. We were talking about how much those old ideas are like today's ideas about the earth and the stars and the sky. I felt sure that you would look up in the sky. You did look up. Now I was certain that I had been following your thoughts, as they had in fact come into your mind. I too looked up and saw that the group of stars we call Orion is very bright and clear tonight. I knew you would notice this and think about the name Orion. Now, follow my thoughts carefully. Only yesterday in the newspaper there was an article about the actor Chantilly. An article which was not friendly to Chantilly, not friendly at all. We noticed that the writer of the article had used some words taken from a book we both had read. These words were about Orion, so I knew you would put together the two ideas of Orion and Chantilly. I saw you smile remembering that article and the hard words in it. Then I saw you stand straighter, as tall as you can make yourself. I was sure you were thinking of Chantilly's size, and especially his height. He is small, he is short, and so I spoke, saying that he is indeed a very little fellow, and he would be more successful if he acted in lighter, less serious plays. I will not say that I was surprised. I was more than surprised. I was astonished. Dupin was right as he could be. Those were in fact my thoughts, my unspoken thoughts, as my mind moved from one thought to the next. But if I was astonished by this, I would soon be more astonished. One morning, this strangely interesting man showed me once again his unusual reasoning power. We heard that an old woman had been killed by unknown persons. The killer or the killers had cut her head off and escaped into the night. Who was this killer, this murderer? The police had no answer. They had looked everywhere and found nothing that helped them. They did not know what to do next, and so they did nothing. But not Dupin. He knew what to do. Paris, July 7th, 1840. In the early morning today, the people in the western part of the city were awakened from their sleep by cries of terror, which came, it seemed, from a house in the streets called the Rue Morgue. The only persons living in the house were an old woman and her daughter. Several neighbors and a policeman ran towards the house, But by the time they reached, the cries had stopped. When no one answered their calls, they forced the door open. As they rushed in, they heard voices, 2 voices. They seemed to come from above. The group hurried from room to room, but they found nothing until they reached the 4th floor. There, they found a door that was firmly closed, locked with the key inside. Quickly, they forced the door open, and they saw spread before them a bloody, sickening scene, a scene of horror. The room was in the wildest possible order. Broken chairs, tables were lying all around the room. There was only one bed, and from it, everything had been taken and thrown into the middle of the floor. There was blood everywhere, on the floor, on the bed, on the walls. A sharp knife covered with blood was lying on the floor. In front of the fireplace, there was some long gray hair, also bloody. It seemed to have been pulled from a human head. On the floor were 4 pieces of gold, an earring, several objects made of silver, and 2 bags containing a large amount of money in gold. Clothes had been thrown around the room. A box was found under the bed covers. It was open and held only a few old letters and papers. There was no one there, or so it seemed. Above the fireplace, they found the dead body of the daughter. It had been put up into the opening where the smoke escapes to the sky. The body was still warm. There was blood on the face, and on the neck there were dark, deep marks, which seemed to have been made by strong fingers. These marks surely show how the daughter was murdered. After hunting in every part of the house without finding anything more, the group went outside. Behind the building, they found the body of the old woman. Her neck was almost cut through, and when they tried to lift her up, her head fell off. The next day, the newspaper offered to its readers these new facts. The murders in the Rue Morgue, Paris, July 8, 1840. The police have talked with many people about the terrible killings in the old house, but nothing has been learned to answer the question of who the killers were. Pauline de Bourg, a washwoman, says she has known both of the dead women for more than 3 years and has washed their clothes during that period. The old woman and her daughter seemed to love each other dearly. They always paid her well. She did not know where their money came from, she said. She never met anyone in the house. Only the 2 women lived on the 4th floor. Perry Murray, a shopkeeper, said the old woman had bought food at his shop for nearly 4 years. She owned the house and had lived in it for more than 6 years. People said they had money. He never saw anyone enter the door, except the old lady and her daughter, and a doctor 8 or 10 times perhaps. Many other persons, neighbors, said the same thing. Almost no one ever went into the house. The old lady and her daughter were not often seen. Jules Mignaud, a banker, says that the old lady had put money in his bank beginning 8 years before. 3 days before her death, she took out of the bank a large amount of money in gold. A man from the bank carried it for her to her house. Isidore Messet, a policeman, says that he was with the group that first entered the house. While he was going up the stairs, he heard 2 voices, one low and soft, and one hard, high, and very strange. The voice of someone who was certainly not French, the voice of a foreigner, Spanish perhaps? It was not a woman's voice. He could not understand what it said, but the low voice, the softer voice said in French, "My God." Alfonso Gracia, who is Spanish and lives in the Rue Morgue, says he entered the house but did not go up the stairs. He is nervous and he was afraid he might be ill. He heard the voices. He believes the high voice was not that of a French man. Perhaps it was English, but he doesn't understand English, so he was not sure. William Bird, another foreigner, an Englishman, says he was one of the persons who entered the house. He had lived in Paris for 2 years. He heard the voices. The low voice was that of a Frenchman. He was sure because he heard it say in French, "My God." The high voice was very loud. He is sure it was not the voice of an Englishman, nor the voice of a Frenchman. It seemed to be that of an Italian. It might have been a woman's voice. He does not understand Italian. Mr. Alberto Montani, an Italian, was passing the house at the time of the cries. He says that they lasted for about 2 minutes. They were screams, long and loud, terrible, fearful sounds. Montani, who speaks Spanish but not French, says that he also heard 2 voices. He thought both voices were French, but he could not understand any of the words spoken. The persons who first entered the house all agreed that the door of the room where the daughter's body was found was locked on the inside. When they reached the door, everything was quiet. When they forced the door open, they saw no one. The windows were closed and firmly locked on the inside. There are no steps that someone could have gone down while they were going up. They say that the openings over the fireplace are too small for anyone to have escaped through them. It took 4 or 5 people to pull the daughter's body out of the opening over the fireplace. A careful search was made through the whole house. It was 4 or 5 minutes from the time they heard the voices to the moment they forced open the door of the room. Paul Dumas, a doctor, says that he was called to see the bodies soon after they were found. They were in horrible conditions, badly marked and broken. Such results could not have come from a woman's hands, only from those of a very powerful man. The daughter had been killed by strong hands around her neck. The police have learned nothing more than this. A killing as strange as this has never before happened in Paris. The police do not know where to begin to look for the answer. When we had finished reading the newspaper's account of the murderers, neither Dupin nor myself said anything for a while. But I could see in his eyes that cold, empty look, which told me that his mind was working busily. When he asked me what I thought of this, I could only agree with all Paris. I told him I considered it a very difficult problem, a mystery to which it was not possible to find an answer. "No," said Dupin. "No, I think you are wrong. A mystery it is, yes, but there must be an answer. Let us go to the house and see what we can see. There must be an answer. There must."